on the topic of FATF Greylisting and the drive for digital payments. Why moving away from cash is crucial. Let's all give them a warm welcome of applause. Thank you.
Afternoon, everyone, to this graveyard session. Let's hope I can liven things up, say some outrageous things, get you thinking, and differing with me as well. And I got invited here. I wondered why me? Why me with payments? It's Greek to me, or Latin, or Sanskrit. No offense to Greek, Latin, Sanskrit speakers. But
where the hell did it?
But this is a bit over-orchestrated for me and much used to more informal arrangements. So let me see what I can try and say. Firstly, just to get the good news out, we will be dual exit to Bayless next week.
I don't want us to celebrate too much.
Okay. But it's just the way the FATF process works. We've done everything we had to do. And you got to go to the plenary, the paperwork's in, and we don't envisage any hitches. And just the way FATF works, which is probably the most mysterious organization under some for multilateral, is that it's almost impossible to overturn a technical decision unless you get almost 100% support to overturn it. In other words, the technical will sway. So that's why we're pretty confident. But before we rush to celebrate, remember we have a mutual evaluation next year, the same as we had in 2019. And I'm feeling very confident about the mutual evaluation since, we've rid our country of crime, it's safe to walk streets, cyber problems. Now, unless you think that's not the case and online, then there's no need to celebrate. We better start preparing for the next 2 years, otherwise we wouldn't be greylisted again. And actually, it's not a bad thing, because exiting greylisting just means we've started to deal with our problems. Before that, we weren't even trying to deal with our problems. So we've just started. And I don't have to tell you, corruption is rampant, it's deeply entrenched. And when you see the free Lamborghinis, all doing color, and the guy is still not arrested for that crime. Is arrested for trying to kill his former girlfriend. He's not arrested for that yet. It's a long time to get arrested in South Africa. So, but then he started by saying that contrary to what the title suggests, it's not correct to say that FATF promotes a shift from cash to digital payment systems. It doesn't really do that. It does maybe try and prompt you in that direction, but it doesn't quite say thou shalt move away from cash. And to be very clear, I'm not sure we'd ever move away from cash 100%. Because for all those who are cheating on their spouse, if you really should have seen like I'm paying my cash. So maybe for good or for bad reasons, but not everybody wants everyone to know what they're doing all the time. Okay? So for those same people, I hope they switch their location on. If they want to be successful. Okay? I'm not promoting that. But just to make the obvious point in life, that unless you think we're all angels 100% of the time, then I don't even move away from cash completely. So FATF doesn't prohibit or require the phasing out of cash. It does have lots of provisions like your cash threshold reporting, the CTRs by banks and accountable institutions. But essentially, the FATF approach, and though I lead South Africa's delegation to the FATF, I'm not a fan of FATF. I think it's a very deep box approach that they adopt. And I think they don't have a developmental approach. So they even greylist many very poor countries. Certainly South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya need to have a top stance. But to Burkina Faso, any of the poorest of countries, I'm not sure that makes any sense. So it does, in terms of its approach, it does have a risk-based approach for countering, and you'll see this all the time. AML, or ML is money laundering, TF is terror financing, and PF is corruption financing. So cash is in any case likely, because it's risk-based. Recommendation 1 deals with having national risk assessments on fighting money laundering, terror financing, and now we'll have to do one for reoperation finance as well. And particularly because cash transactions are anonymous, untraceable, and difficult to monitor, it does tend to feature, I would expect, in most countries' national risk assessment. So FATF requires, when you have high risks, to mitigate those high risks in some way. So, compliance with the FATF recommendations, and FATF, as I said to you, it speaks in another language. So it doesn't say 40 FATF standards. It's 40 standard recommendations. And vote to you if you break any of them, whether you remember FATF or not, okay? So doesn't encourage it directly, but certainly indirectly there is the motivation to do so. So I'm not going to deal with all of these recommendations, aside from the fact that I don't know them off by heart and don't intend to. But every time you see R, it means one of the recommendations. And FATF, when it does a mutual evaluation, in other words, every 6 to 8 or 10 years, but now they're trying to do every 6 years, they do a country review. And the review is called a mutual evaluation. And so we're due to have ours next year. The reason why it's so close to our greylisting is because of something called COVID. We had our mutual evaluation done in 2019, and then COVID disrupted it for at least 2 years. And so the plenary only adopted our mutual evaluation in 2022, and 2021, and we got greylisted in 2023 February, because they give you about a year plus to try and fix things up. So there's many recommendations kind of deal with cash, whether it's the risk-based approach, the customer due diligence, definitely the CGRs, the STRs, the suspicious transaction records, the cash threshold reporting. All of that's there. So I'm not going to go through all of that, but just, I use ChatGPT to how to just identify it. FATF also assesses you for effectiveness or your ability to implement. So it's got the 40 standards or recommendations, which you're supposed to have in your legal framework. And you're supposed to comply with almost all of that. Currently, by the way, we comply with 38 or 37, plus the 38 it's now not applicable. And only don't comply with 2. Recommendation 8 on NPOs and recommendation 32 on clear cash depredations. That's when you cross the border. You need to have, and if you go to Europe or America or anywhere, there's $10,000 limits or euros or whatever. You've got to declare that if you're carrying them in cash. So the other side, as I said, is effectiveness. And as you know, in South Africa, we are fantastic at implementation. We implement our laws fully and properly and effectively. Indeed, we did so well. There's 11 measures. Surprise, surprise, we failed all 11 in 2019. Some were moderate, severe, and some were just low effectiveness. So we kind of failed everything. But these are some of the immediate outcomes, as they call them, in FATF's fee. Yeah, so there's 11 of them. IO1, as they call it, will deal with your national risk assessments. And I'll go through this pretty in a moment. So, just to be clear, South Africa was not grey-listed because there were any particularly significant risks of the cash economy over and above other things. That was not the reason. As I said, we were assessed in 2019. Initially, we failed on the legal framework because we only complied or largely complied with 20 of the 40. So we didn't comply with 20 or 6 as well. Okay. Shouldn't surprise you because Jacob Zuma, when he was our president, he did everything and anything to try and stop us from implementing laws, for example, on politically exposed persons. Took us a year, by the way, to persuade cabinet. And when we finally went through parliament, he then said the legislation was under the constitution. So there was a lot of hoo-ha, if you remember, we just fell back. And as I said, we failed on all 11 immediate outcome measures. So, the underlying reason why we got grey-listed was really because of state capture. State capture had weakened our institutions, got rid of the scorpions. It weakened the police. The hawks came in to replace the scorpions, the police, the NPA, SARS, even the Treasury at some point. If you look at one of our past two, one was a few days wonder and one now immediately, I'd say. So, we had these characters who took over, and their job was to do exactly the opposite of what they were supposed to do. But like in another country somewhere, where you go for the head of your investigative agency, and you go for anyone who's prosecuted you. Of course, it doesn't have an early advanced economy, but that's kind of what happened here. Okay, so it certainly weakened our institutions, and we got grey-listed, and we had 22 what's called the action plan, 22 action items, and those that dealt with cash, I guess, would be what's called IO34 number 1, which is money or value transfer services. So this reads, for the authorities to proactively identify and act against unlicensed cross-border money or value transfer services. So it would refer to Hawala. It would refer to all those illegal ways of getting money out of the country. We really struggle with this one, by the way. And then there are your designated non-financial business practices, I think, and businesses and professionals services, right? There we were not regulating in any way for money laundering and terror financing. The legal profession, estate agents, precious stone dealers. It's up to the country to identify. But if you looked at those, we hadn't even done that. So we had at least 3 measures there, the ABC, each of them cocked towards the GE2. And then IO7 was really tough. Surprise, surprise, because it was about showing a sustained increase or investigations and prosecutions of complex money laundering. Now, then the special type, the assessors came and they wondered, why are your cases so slow? In a way to provide case studies, and you can say, it's because that happens with all cases. We're not discriminating against money laundering cases. Okay, so they did force us to sit with our law enforcement agencies and say, what the heck? Why is it taking so long? Why does it take so long to even arrest the guy who's got the 3 Lamborghinis? Okay? Because from what I know, as I said, it's the other guy who's there, you're trying to kill his girlfriend. He's still out, okay? He's still out, okay? But they are friends of that. So, we take forever. All they've done is our authorities have managed to seize those cars and those assets. Which, by the way, was a good lesson that the FATF process taught us, which was, don't sort of work sequentially. Often you focus on the crime and the criminal investigations, but you don't move on asset forfeitures or try and freeze the money and so on. And money can disappear very quickly, especially if it goes across the border. It becomes like we know with the Guptas. They took their money out, and it's very, very difficult to get the money back into the country. So IO7 just has general applicability about how do we improve our law enforcement system, and IO8 had to deal with asset forfeitures. So we certainly haven't solved all those problems. We've just begun to do so. And really, the focus for us now is the next 2 years, the mutual evaluation. We need to show that we continue to improve, and they're going to look at cases as well. And with the Madlana Commission and so on, this is all going to be, I think, pretty hard. And the 5th round is actually much harder. I just put it down because we're going to have to look at crypto as well as a sector. So, as you know, the end of state capture has not ended corruption. And this is still the greatest threat, in my view, to us having a successful mutual evaluation. In fact, if anything, corruption has just become more decentralized. Our procurement system is almost open season, as you can see, with the Tembisa Hospital. And I'm pretty certain that there's many other Tembisa hospitals. But, the officials there, the accounting department of Cal, which I consider one of the most corrupt departments in the country, they don't seem curious. Is it happening in any other hospital? So that worries you. And I think part of it is because I think the culture of the public service changed after Mr. Zuma became president. And I think we are suffering from that culture, where it's how much I can eat, not how much can I serve the people. And I believe a spontaneous approach to fighting corruption will not succeed in ending corruption. We've got to look at our procurement system. We've got to take an activist approach if we really want to deal with this. But I'm not going to deal with all of those things. Let me get to the topic. And I want to start with the warn. My views on from here is my personal views. So treat them with caution. My knowledge of the payment system is zero and dangerous. And as I said, much of my other research for this presentation was, you said GPT. Huh? So, I'm not going to go into the reasons. Most people that have come here believe implicitly it's good to digitize all pays. They may even believe that we should have a cashless society. So I'll put the word in. Not that I think anybody would really believe them if you push them hard enough, okay? So I won't go into the reasons. I think there's lots of benefits. It would help SARS because it may or may not make tax evasion harder. I think the bigger question we have to ask is who will benefit? Will low-income people really benefit? Will they be the losers? What are the risks in terms of financial inclusion and exclusion? There's no doubt that digitization will help us when we do the FATF mutual evaluation, but I won't deal with it. assuming even if we went to the extreme end of a cashless society, it certainly won't be a panacea to ending, say, bribery and corruption. Because if you look at it, and my next point in red, yes, the Zondo Commission showed Bosasa in cash. Yes, the Guptas offered our deputy minister a lot of cash and presumably did that with lots of people. They went with bags and bags. And they get cash. But there's many, many kickbacks that were done electronically, ETFs or whatever. And yet, we've not acted against it. Okay? So, digitizing or having a formal payment system is not going to, it will be naive to think it's going to solve our problems. And in fact, shifting away from cash will not stop or reduce the scope for corruption. The guys who are cheating us are very clever, maybe smarter than us, and more than that, they're like water. They know where to go. If there's a gap there, they go through the gap. Okay? And if you want to deal with the speed at which they operate, and I know many on the payment system say we need real-time payments. Well, if you're going to have real-time payments, how are you going to recover those if you find that they were crooked payments? Trust is going to be lost in this sector if it does exist. Okay? So those are the kinds of issues we need to look at. We still need to strengthen our regulatory prevention, preventative monitoring, law enforcement systems, and certainly look at how we fight corruption. But we do need to understand, why are low-income households reluctant to be cashless? Why is it that many people who take SESA grants, as soon as it comes, they cash the entire amount? I don't have the numbers in front of me, but that's what people happens. Are the costs of transacting digitally too high for people? Perhaps they need smartphones. I know you can get cheap smartphones. Check this. You can pay. But maybe, sorry, that should be Wi-Fi. That they don't have access to Wi-Fi or the internet. They may not be very literate. It may be age. To try and have your granny or grandfather or parents, you know how difficult it is. And so how do we ensure nobody's going to be left behind? I'm not going to go through this, but I thought the Reserve Bank's 2024 payment study is very useful because it shows 36% of all payments, when they did their survey, were for cash, followed only by debit card payments at 34% and credit card far behind. So obviously it's only richer people like us who had this rule and who have credit cards. Okay. And the average value of the transactions are pretty low. So we just need to understand the nature of or how poor households, what's rational and what's not. I'm not going to go into it. I really think the big problem, and this is where I want to stir, I think it's disgraceful that charges and costs are high. We fought with the retirement industry about late charges. You think you're stupid if you ask, but actually they deliberately hide it, and it's hidden in contracts. I think all of these, whether it's BankServe, Visa, SWIFT, MasterCard, all of these, that I learned in Ozo, whatever, we need to know what they charge. We also need to know what do they treat their customers pay? What happens when they scan us? Do they say, no, it's just their customers and walk away? They have a responsibility to their customers. They need to, I just try to get from ChatGPT, just look at Visa and Mastercard. There's the network fees, the annual fees, the interest rates, and I'm sure there's many more. What do they charge? ultimately it's the customer who pays. These are just numbers I got. They may be nonsensical. I wish someone would come up and say they're wrong, and these are the correct figures. Yeah. Again, I got this. Yeah, I just thought I would have. Yes, is speed and so on. Okay. So in ending, I want to say we need total transparency on costs and charges. And similar things need to be regulated similar. That's been the core principle when we designed a Twin Peaks regulatory system. The problem we face today is that many platforms, let's take digital wallets, they hold a deposit. Now, I'm not saying they need to be treated like a bank, but they need at least some form of tighter regulation. Because will they have the ability to pay back when people want their money back? You can look at many other examples. Online sports bet has gone out of control. So one thing I failed to do once I was at the Treasury, go for the gambling industry. Praveen Gordon talked about having a tax, but after COVID, as you know, if you just read the various articles, sports betting has exploded. And by the way, the system is, someone was telling me, when you go to a casino, it's something like for every 100 Rand that's put down, they've got to return 92 Rands. So they make their money on maybe 7 Rands, and 1 Rand goes for whatever charges. Sports betting doesn't have those things, and it's online. So as we promote these digital platforms, can we also think about these problems and what we do about that? And I would say FSCA needs to become, we need to change our law, because when we did the Financial Services Regulation Act, we didn't deal with the NPS, the National Payment System. And I think that these need to be taken into account, and they need to take account from the customer user perspective. And so, already said this. So let me conclude by saying that yes, nice story, will exit the grey list, but let's not celebrate too much, because there's real hard work ahead. And let me say, the hard work ahead is not for FATF or only to prevent us getting grey listed. It's actually for our country. It's good for us. So we're doing it for ourselves. There's many good reasons to digitize and aspire to never get to total cashless, to reduce the role of cash. But let's not say it's because of FATF. It isn't. It is a mild push there perhaps. But really, there's many good things about it. But we're going to have to have customer due diligence. We're going to have strict anti-money laundering standards. But we also need to go beyond that and get market conduct in place. We need to know about charges, and then maybe we'll live happily ever after. I was told there's fresh juice. I don't know how that happens, or it's gone my. I don't see it. Oh, here's you. Hey. How is possible that at an individual level I'm accountable for 500 Rand to SARS? Yet 2 minute people can run through the. Okay. I'm not the commissioner of SARS. And yes, I might have legislated over the tax legislation, but that is a good question. We do need everyone to pay a fair share of taxes. And there's always the incentive, and that's why we say, I used to say, when I was in that job, that, you don't want to judge SARS by how much revenue it collects, because then they'll do everything to just collect revenue and be unfair to their taxpayers. Okay? So you got to make sure you get the balance right and measures that make sure that you don't had perverse incentives, whether it's SARS or any other agencies. The next question, Trump's decision. Is part of going greylist the US okay? Will it have the guts? Okay. By the way, the US is going through a mutual evaluation this year and next year, or maybe starts early next year. And of course, their approach on beneficial ownership, because they've moved back on that. Their approach to the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act issues there. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what happens, how the mutual evaluation assessors will assess that. You know, the UN assessors, when they talked about genocide in Gaza, they got sanctioned by the US, but we work of the UN. So we live the geopolitics is tough, and we live in a world. It's always been unfair, but it's just going to be even more unfair. So how do we deal with this world? I don't have the answers, but it's going to be tough. And of course, there's no climate change, so we're all going to be very happy. Hey, but that's the denialism. Remember how Thabo Mbeki got attacked, rightly so, when he had his HIV denial, AIDS denials. Well, there's people on over deniers. There's, the move against vaccines. The spot change denials. So it seems in today's world, you choose whatever you want to believe in. Equal. And next generation will suffer the consequence. I don't know if there's any others that's too new, okay? No, there aren't anymore. No one from the floor. Happy to take questions. Yes, now with some 4 minutes.
Not really in question. Needless much to say, well done on a very difficult topic. Excellent presentation and really enjoyed the humor. Thank you.
Okay. No, thank you for that. But, I hate praising. What I want to say is, the ability for each of us to criticize each other in a constructive way is a very valuable skill. And I think that the mutual evaluation, I would welcome any views, thoughts. Put my email address in, because I think in preparing for that, we need to be aware of all these weaknesses to your system. And there's a lot of weaknesses in any system. And, I've always said, in the public sector, you need a thick skin and not personalize it when people criticize. People have the right to criticize, and they must criticize. And you actually learn far more when people criticize about how to improve the system to make it work better. So let me invite you. I think that as we deal with mutual evaluation, how can we make our country better? How can we make it safer? How can we deal with financial crimes? Yet get fantastic payment systems and digitize. Thank you.